Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about the devastating toll that Hurricane Helene has taken on in the Southeast. Communities have been completely wiped off the map. There's no power. There's no forms of communication. All infrastructure has been lost. These people have absolutely nothing. Everything's been taken from them. And we want to talk to you about the challenges that first responders have in having to deal with these types of situations. Some of these towns are small. They don't have a lot of resources available to them. And we're going to have someone call in who's down there to describe to us what it exactly is like in the midst of chaos. And you're going to hear things that you're not going to hear anywhere else. This is the Shots Fired podcast. I'm Kyle Schoberg, and to my right is Mark Redlich.
We want to thank Verizon Frontline for sponsoring today's episode. They provide first responders with reliable solutions to help keep them connected in extreme and routine situations. They deliver choice, innovation, and reliable, highly secure option for first responder organizations.
All right, so we've been watching on the news the devastation that Hurricane Helene has caused, and you know it's one thing to see it on the news, and it's another thing to be, boots on the ground during or after a natural disaster like this. We've been involved in natural disasters, which we'll get into later, and what that's actually like working those. But things that you see on TV are just nothing compared to what it's actually like to be there after the fact.
Yeah, I've been looking at the news and a bunch of different videos on it, and it's heartbreaking to see that communities there's literally nothing left. It's just trash.
Yeah, they're gone.
Yeah, and trying to process. It's hard enough to try to comprehend what's happening just by watching it on the news. It's impactful, but I couldn't imagine what it's like for all of those people that are living there right now and experiencing that.
Yeah, I mean, you have families that have lost loved ones. There's people that are missing. I mean, when you're down there and you're dealing with these things, I mean, they have nowhere to go. A lot of these people are still stranded at their houses, and first responders are actually still trying to get to them and figure out how, where some of these people live off map, right? Like they live off the grid. So getting to those people, finding out what are their medical needs, what resources do they have? Some of these folks need, things that they would ordinarily go to their doctors to get, right? Like doctor's appointments and stuff, and they can no longer do that stuff now. And I think people forget about that. It's not just the everyday person who, you and I who are perfectly healthy, go to work every day and lose your house. I mean, there's people that rely on certain things to live day to day. And when you take that away from them, that's devastating to people. So then the question becomes, well, where do these resources now come from? How do you supply people with that? You have to evacuate those people, get them to other towns or cities that haven't been, devastated by this hurricane, and get them to either a hospital or some type of medical facility.
I think watching some of the news clips, the media, the videos that are out there, it really makes me wonder, am I actually prepared for a natural disaster? And you look at yes, there's plenty of people that have listened to the advisory and the warnings and the evacuations, and they're able to collect their items and what they feel is valuable and evacuate safely. But there's other considerations that, like you said, there's people that don't have any form of communication, that live in rural areas, that may understand the weather, but maybe they didn't have the capability to evacuate. They're physically not capable. Maybe they're elderly. And then you think, when you do evacuate, even simple things like if you're dependent upon specific medications, how much medication do you have and how long will those medications last? Because in some of these communities, there's nothing to go back to other than looking at the rubble that is left on the ground. And how long can you sustain? And like you said, there is a ripple effect. You're leaving one community and you're evacuating. Now you're almost overpopulating these other areas and taking resources from them, and resources have to be shifted to that. There's a major chain of event that's going on right here. And it's absolutely heartbreaking to see the effects of what Helene has done. Yeah.
Even if you look at some of the photos that you see on either the internet or the news, like some roads that have been completely washed away or demolished, that is people's lifelines to get in and out of there. And just simply taking a road away from people, they can no longer there's no ingress or egress for them. So, which is also challenging for first responders to be able to get to those people. So even, you take for granted like a street, just completely removing a street is devastating to people, especially people who live out in these rural areas. So I think it's one thing to see it on TV and they interview some of these people that live there, but when you're actually there and you're living it and you're seeing it for yourself firsthand, it's devastating. I mean, I've done it myself for wildland fires that have completely wiped out communities, and it's pretty telling. But like you said, the ripple effect thing, I think that's where people forget to think about.
Yeah. And also we look at first responders is the boots on the ground, the ones that are there to help. And I expect that, you expect that, and our communities expect that of first responders. But we also, it's easy to forget that those first responders working in those communities live in those communities that have been destroyed, and they may have nothing to come back to, and they're still out there working. I mean, those community members that are first responders that are out there are absolute heroes to be doing that when they've known that their families are maybe missing. There's things that they have nothing to come back to. But then also we can't forget about the volunteers, because volunteers are huge in these situations. They don't have to be there. They're coming and putting themselves at risk to help and to bring resources. It's amazing what's going on.
Yeah, and I think for Hurricane Helene, the interesting thing is you have a huge group of prior first responders that have deployed down there, volunteering their time. And you've got prior people in the military and special forces operations that have deployed there, who run nonprofits, and they're volunteering and making a huge stride in helping these people with reliefs and evacuating people. And it's pretty amazing, some of the stories that we've heard. So let's bring on Eric, who's down there firsthand, is going to explain and walk us through what it's actually been like to be down there, and then what the recovery processes have actually been like. We spoke to him briefly before this, and it's like nothing I've heard. You don't hear any of this on the news.
Yeah. All right, let's get Eric on the phone and see what he has to say.
All right, so we have Eric Tansey on the phone, who's down there in North Carolina. Eric, can you hear us?
I can. How are you guys doing?
Good, man. Hey, thanks for jumping on this phone call. We really wanted you to call in and give the listeners or the viewers a firsthand experience of what it's like. You're in North Carolina, and just walk us through like the devastating toll that Hurricane Helene has left. As someone who's down there volunteering, your previous first responder, where are you, and walk us through what it's like down there?
Yeah, man. Well, one, it's destruction of biblical proportion. Been here on the ground since it's been about 2 weeks. Since I got here, pretty much. I started working Monday, the week after that happened. I've kind of lost track of days, but done everything from search and rescue to switching over to search and recovery. And then right now, this week, I'm even switching back over to more of like a humanitarian morale building kind of mission. We're just, mentally exhausted, physically exhausted. I'm working with a group of guys, special operations guys. I come from special operations background when I was in the military, and then of course being a law enforcement officer. And one of my old buddies threw together kind of a team to get to work where there isn't anybody getting to work. And they established an airfield with helicopters, aircraft. We've got pararescue men. We've got combat controllers. We've got cut teams with chainsaws. We've got medical teams. Pretty much all these teams going out on operations. They've done countless rescues. I have no idea how many bodies they've recovered as a team so far, but they're recovering lots of bodies in the last week. And it's been a real crazy effort. And we got about 100 to 150 people right now, volunteers, that are running operations out of the Banner Elk Airfield. We got civil affairs teams knocking on doors, trying to see what the community needs are, reporting that back to the hangar, and then deploying as needed. Anywhere from airlifting people out and getting them to the hospitals, to bringing insulin to them, to getting oxygen to them, to getting gasoline for their generators. Just been a really impressive, very impressive effort by civilians, by special operations veterans, by regular veterans, combat veterans, you name it. Everybody just kind of come together in the last 3 weeks. And, there's hundreds and hundreds of miles of devastation that I don't know that anybody's ever seen before. Mudslides have taken out complete neighborhoods. towns flooding, where we've been to neighborhoods that are gone, and so are all the people that were living in it. To the point where you don't even realize that there was a town, there was a neighborhood there to begin with, just flat concrete foundation. Just like I said, destruction on a biblical scale. Some of the problems we've been running into is there's no infrastructure anymore. Some of these towns a lot of these towns are completely cut off from civilization. The roads have been completely washed away, and you have complete hollows or hollers, as they call them up here, that are cut off from the rest of the world. And some of these hollers that we've rolled up into, they're like, you're the first people we've seen in 4 days. Like, we've all banded together as a community. We're sharing food and water. We're all just the resources that we had here as a neighborhood, we've kind of put together. But where is everybody? And we're like, we don't know either, man. I think in 2 weeks, I've been flying. I've been on rivers and kayaks. I've been on rafts. I've hiked in and hiked out. I've slept in these towns and these communities somewhere different almost every night. I've seen 12 National Guard soldiers total in 2 weeks. I'm not saying that they're not there. We just haven't seen them. And every town, we're going into these hard-hit towns that have, people missing in large amounts, and there's nobody there to help them. We have no cell phone communication. Some of these operations are taking 2 days just to establish some form of communication, right? So we're getting into these neighborhoods, finding out that they've got a family of 5 that got swept away, and nobody's gone out and looked for this family of 5 yet. And so we're taking notes, canvassing, getting as much information as we can, and then we have to drive an hour and a half back to the hangar, get this put on a map, get this intel to our ops center so they know where we're going to be, how long we're going to be there. And then we got to drive an hour and a half back, kind of start the searching process, get a location of where we could start, go back an hour and a half, get to the hangar, get in a helicopter, find a landing site that we can get dogs, ATVs, 4-wheelers on the ground, get them on the ground. And then we have to pretty much monitor the operation via helicopters and time hacks, because there are no radios, there are no cell phone towers, there is no communication, no GPS. It's really funny because we're all having to use Atlas maps, and
Yeah.
That's bizarre, man. Like, we're having a hard time. Like, you give me a map and a compass and a protractor, I'm good. But we don't have grid maps out here. So we're all using like road atlases. And a lot of road atlases just use road numbers, and all these roads have names, but no numbers. So you might be on Sherry Brook Road, but on the map, that's 17 East, or 19 East. So yeah, it's just been just this wild effort. But, if I could say one thing to you guys, have you guys seen the movie Civil War?
I have, yeah.
That was
Yep.
directed and produced, I think, by the Obamas, and
Yeah.
it's kind of a political movie. I watched that movie when it came out, and it didn't sit right with me. That movie really impacted me, and it made me sad, and it made me scared. And I actually thought about moving my family to Costa Rica after watching that movie, because I couldn't fathom a world or America that I live in like that. I learned in the last 2 weeks, guys, that movie's not real. And they forgot one thing in that movie. And the one thing that they forgot is there are thousands more good human beings than there are bad. And the good human beings will come down on the couple of bad ones in ways that are unfathomable. Whereas in the movie Civil War, you might roll into one of these back roads and you might find these like crazy militia guys. That's not true. You roll up into these and it's, how y'all's doing? What can I do y'all for? How can I help you? And they haven't had electricity in 2 weeks, and all they can think about is, how can I help you? And so I really got this refreshing breath of fresh air. It's almost like this post 9/11 December 12th feel, where I'm proud again to be an American, to see what Americans are really like in an apocalyptic situation. And so it's not completely selfless, right? People are like, man, thank you for all that you're doing. And I'm like, wow, listen, like, if you get out here and one of these people hug you and tell you their story and cry, you will want to find the next, and then the next. And it's really just like addicting kind of thing. So it's not completely selfless for me. I'm getting as much out of this as I'm putting into it. It's actually been extremely amazing for my mental health. So really proud to be a part of this. It's so sad at the same time, but there's no place on earth I'd rather be than here and helping these folks.
Well, what you and your team are doing is amazing, and we're on the West Coast, but thank you for all that you're doing. It's got to be a massive challenge. So how did you get involved in that? Like how did you decide to make that decision? I'm going out there to help.
Well, at the very beginning, you saw from the people on the ground, I live in North Carolina, so I'm close to these folks. I own a cabin in the vicinity of where we're working at as well that we had actually just previously sold, but I know all the people. I grew up with a lot of these people. And so when you start getting these calls, right, they're like, where's the National Guard? Where is everybody? Where is help coming? And I don't think that the rest of the world realizes there's hundreds of miles of mountainous people, Appalachians. Like, these are hard mountainous people who are survivalists. These are mountain men, and it's hundreds of miles of them. And so, like, I don't know that there's ever been like a time where the National Guards had to come help them, right? So, but now they do need it. And so there's this big thing on social media, and a lot of people started flying their own helicopters and their own ATVs. And then these bureaucratic folks were like, stop, we don't need you. Or, the first call I got was, hey man, they're not giving us body bags, and we've got 400 bodies up here. We need body bags. And so I had to coordinate 2 morgue trucks and some body bags to a location in Hayward County, to Mission Health. And that's where it kind of started. And then I got there on Tuesday, and I went to a command post that was set up by, I guess, I don't know if it was FEMA or fire department or whatever. But what I saw was 100 dudes, at least, with chainsaws, side-by-sides, four-wheelers, and they're all in the staging area. And when I drove to that site, I drove through tons of towns that are wiped off the map and didn't see anyone in these towns as far as law enforcement, fire departments, or anything. It was just kind of empty with people just milling around like zombies. And so I'm sitting at this checkpoint or this command post, and after a couple of hours of not being tasked, I go to this old burly man with a chainsaw and a side-by-side, and I said, what have you guys been doing? And they were like, dude, we've been here for 2 days. They won't release us. They tell us we can't go. We can't go. They won't give us assignment. Every once in a while, they pick somebody to do something. But I got with a group of guys, and we just were like deuces. We had side-by-sides, cutters. We got in a convoy of about 6 vehicles, town to town to town, and taking notes and getting addresses. And, we're hearing these stories like, man, this trailer washed down that way, and all my friends were in that trailer. Like, her husband and wife are gone. And, we actually recovered those bodies down the river with some park rangers. And we're just going to these villages or these towns that haven't been gotten to. And then that sprung to another guy, a couple other operations guys that were like, hey, we've got little birds, we've got helicopters, and we got these whole teams. Where are you at? Come get in with us and help us since you've been out here for 4 days. So I, showed up to that hangar, and they'd already had it. Like, they had an ops center set up. They had helicopters. They had combat controllers. They established an entire airspace of their own and their own teams. And they were like, look, we're going to put you on search and rescue, or we're going to put you on search and recovery, or, we're going to send you to get insulin out there. And just, wherever I could fit in is where I fit in. And they didn't care. There wasn't any bureaucracy. There was like, you're here. What are you good at? Put your name on this piece of paper. We're going to give you what you need and a team that you need, and we're going to send you out. And, if you're a nurse, we're going to send you where they need nurses. If you're a chainsaw guy, we're going to send you to where they need chainsaws. That's kind of how I got involved.
I think that's one of the things that people aren't hearing is like how this stuff is being established, who's deploying out, and really like who's taking charge of this whole thing. I think that's where people are missing out on. What has been, I know the whole thing's been challenging, but in your own opinion, like what's been the most challenging part of this whole thing?
Just really just no internet, no cell phone, no GPS, no cell phone comms. We're back to the Stone Age. This is like you're driving an hour through the mountains, which might be only like 19 miles, but it takes you an hour because the roads are kind of gone, and you're using 4-wheel drive, and you're having to cut your way into these places. You're getting lost. We spend more time backing trailers down roads that are closed than we do anything else, and that's because lack of GPS. But imagine you finally get to where you're at, and you got a grandma who hasn't seen her daughter because her daughter left the night of the storm to go grab supplies or to go get help, and she hasn't seen her in 5 days, and she's there with a 2-year-old daughter and completely ill-prepared, which is a true story. So this daughter drugged her 2-year-old with grandma and made her ran out the night before the storm hit to go get stuff and never made it back, and extremely sad. And now this woman is scared because she doesn't know where her daughter is. She has a 2-year-old. She hasn't seen anybody in 4 or 5 days. She has no diapers. So she needed stuff immediately. 1, she needs a shelter to go to. 2, she needs diapers, baby food. She needs all the stuff. So imagine finding that person and not being able to call somebody, knowing that an hour down the road are diapers, food, people who can get her shelter, all this stuff. And instead, you got no room to put her in your own vehicle. So now you have to leave one dude with her and then drive an hour and something back to let them people know where she's at and how to get to her, and then try to establish some way of getting back to her. I mean, and we're doing that all day. So you're helping one person when you know that if you had a cell phone, if you had a radio, if you had anything, you could help that one person in 45 minutes versus spending, a solid 4 hours to try to rescue one person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's wild what you guys are dealing with. And you mentioned not having communication and then navigation. And I think for us, we are at that time period where we started to grow up in our early 20s where we had to know how to navigate. Cell phones weren't always available, but a lot of the younger generation rely on that stuff. So the challenge that you have right now is huge. So I ask you, how are you getting these supplies, and how are these supplies getting to those that need it?
So, man, let me say that I'm not a church-going man myself. I should be, probably will after this. It's actually funny. A lot of us guys have talked about how spiritual we've actually gotten from this trip. These are hard special operators from all walks of life, from SEALs to MARSOC. And a lot of the conversations we're having at night around the campfires is like how spiritual we become, because churches have stepped up, not mega churches or anything like that, but like just little mom and pop churches all over the place are going over and beyond the call of duty. I mean, these are sometimes like 60 and 70-year-old folks in these small churches that are running 24-hour operations for us. We're able to work with places like Badges and Boxes, which is a law enforcement donation thing for abused and battered women that are actually getting semi-trucks of goods delivered to these churches for us as checkpoints, or kind of like we call them checkpoints, but collection points, so that we're not having to drive hours and hours around. We're able to just pull into these churches. And the great thing about it is they're not making us put down an email address. They're not making us write down what we're taking. They're just saying like, what do you need? Here's your, putting it on the back of the truck, going or getting us to the next truck. But they don't have cell phones either. So, getting trucks delivered to these, the trucks are having to, use their own Atlas maps and things. But that's how we're doing it, man. It's really churches like Samaritan's Purse, Boy Scout troops, believe it or not, are coming through hard on this.
It's crazy. I've been a part of some natural disasters over here on the West Coast. We get a lot of wildfires, and it is truly devastating to see what these natural disasters do to these communities, and the behind the scenes things is what people don't see. And you said it earlier, it's almost like a post 9/11 thing. And I think it's sad, but it does happen when you have something like this happen, how everybody does rally together. And like, you kind of compared it to that movie Civil War, which I did see that. And you're right. It was kind of like, wow, I hope that never really happens. But when stuff like this does happen, it is very reassuring to know that guys like yourself, all the other guys, men and women that have stepped up to volunteer, the community members that have lost their house, but they're still showing up to help. Mark mentioned it before you got on the show, how a lot of times, firefighters, cops, like the people, the first responders that are down there helping, a lot of them have lost their own homes. Some of them have lost family members and they're still down there volunteering and helping. So it is very reassuring to know that, I guess, you can't always rely on the folks that you think are going to help you to come help you. It's really the people like yourself and your friends who show up to volunteer, who have no stake in the game, but you're doing it just out of the kindness of your heart and wanting to help a fellow American, if you will. Mark, do you have anything you want to ask him?
Thank you for all your efforts out there and all your hard work for putting your family on the side to do this. And please extend that thank you to your team as well. A lot of them are not getting the proper thank you. So please be sure to thank them.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate you guys getting the word out. That's kind of why I agreed to go on your podcast, because I think the world needs to know what's going on here. I think this is the greatest war story that's never been told. A lieutenant colonel from Special Operations from SOCOM gave a speech the other night to SEALs, MARSOC, Coast Guard rescue divers. I mean, the best of the best are at this hangar. And he gave a speech the other night after we just have been working so hard day in and day out. And he said that he's been operating in Operation Enduring Freedom, for over 20 years. He's been fighting wars abroad. He was at the Afghanistan pullout. They were in the Ukraine, getting people out of Ukraine. And he said, of all the operations, he said, I've spilled blood with most of you guys in here. I've served with some of you guys in some kind of capacity. And then he began to cry. And he said, but gentlemen, I have never been more proud in my life to serve in this capacity in our own hometown, and what you guys have done and how far you've come to get it done. And he said, I want to let you know, gentlemen, that there is no mission in your life that will be greater than the mission that you've done here. And there wasn't a dry eye from all of these operators. And he was 100% true. And I think that this is the greatest war story that has never been told. What these men accomplished by establishing an airfield, by establishing their own med points, by getting their own by getting their own helicopters and their own airplanes, their own equipment, drones, anything like boats, rafts, dirt bikes, quads that they're borrowing from Gulf forces, from civilians, and that they've put together this entire operation is a war story that has to be told. And I appreciate you guys all the way on the West Coast for even caring, as much as you are out there on the West Coast. It means so much to us. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And we hope you guys stay safe out there, and we'll keep in contact. And we wish all of you guys the best of luck.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Take care.
All right.
Take care.
Hey, take care, Eric. Thank you, man, for calling in. Wow. So it's pretty amazing to hear from Eric and all of the things that the organization he's there with, and the things that they're doing, and like the lack of resources that they have, and the complete devastation that hurricane has caused to those communities. It's always interesting to hear the behind the scenes of like truly what's going on. And I had mentioned it before, like I've been to wildfires here out on the West Coast that have completely ripped through towns, and being there firsthand is like nothing other. I mean, it's not like watching it on the news. It's you do get a firsthand experience of what it's truly like. And he's right. I mean, you do get community members that step up, first responder personnel who are involved in the rescues and, working day in and day out, long hours. I mean, a lot of them lose their own homes as well. And so, but I keep circling back to, it sounds like their biggest challenge that they're running into, and what I've run into in dealing with these types of things is the communication or lack thereof. And again, I think that's why Verizon Frontline has come out with their innovative technology and tools and equipment to be able to actively or proactively respond out to natural disasters, or when there's a major critical incident going on, to provide just the communication in and of itself, which may not sound like a big deal when you just say, oh, well, there's no communication, so I can't use a cell phone or a radio or whatever. I mean, it's a huge, huge deal. And it's not the fact that you just can't use your cell phone. I mean, everything is coordinated through being able to call somebody, communicate, text message, email, to get resources, to get supplies. There would be no other way to do that if you didn't have that ability. And so that's why Verizon Frontline has stepped up and they have responded out to Hurricane Helene and try to help with those efforts of restoring the infrastructure and the communication that's been lost.
I've never had the opportunity to respond to like a wildfire or a natural disaster like you have. So it's hard for me to relate. But what I can relate to is the passion that he has in his voice. And you can tell there's like frustration, there's emotional levels. Like he went through quite a bit talking about that and describing what challenges they are facing. And he's doing that on a volunteer basis, which is amazing. And I do want to point out some of the things that he was talking about, like the communication aspect is that there really is none. And we had talked quite a bit offline as well, that a lot of their communication is done through hand signals through their the airfield that they've created, which we didn't get into specifics of what those hand signals are, but a lot of it is a challenge with not having the communication. I mean, it was interesting. He even pointed out that they have teams were saying, we're going to go to this location, and they go out and have to leave someone there and then come back. I mean, that is some major coordination. And what's interesting is losing all forms of communication, because you mentioned at the beginning that Helene has devastated stuff and destroyed infrastructure. So talking about simple things is like cell phones. You look at, there's thousands of cell phone towers that are out there, but what a lot of times we don't think about is that there's infrastructure that gets to those cell sites, fiber optics, then you have power. And like what was interesting about Verizon is about 80% of the cell phone towers that they have are built with generators that are there in the event of a power loss. So they have the generator capabilities, and then all of them have battery backups. But when you lose infrastructure, those sites, and right now, up to date, Verizon's restored to almost 90% of their towers that have been destroyed, but they don't have the infrastructure for some of those to actually work. So what they have is like the mobile response teams that deploy out, and they have trailers that have small mobile cell phone towers that have generators set up, and they deploy those in strategic locations to restore communication, which is pretty interesting. I never would have thought like anything about that.
So you mentioned some of the resources that Verizon Frontline offers. Explain to people exactly like what are some of those resources and tools that they actually have? I know one of them is their truck that they call Thor, that they can actually respond out to these major events with, and what exactly like do they supply with that?
So Thor, it's really interesting. It's a tactical humanitarian operations response vehicle. And it's basically a mobile private Verizon 5G ultra wideband and mobile edge compute rapid response command center. And yes, I'm reading this because it is super
was very tongue tied.
Yeah, it's very technical. Vehicle, which is capable of deploying Verizon 5G ultra wideband along with additional Verizon Frontline technology. So basically this truck is equipped with everything that you need for first responders. And one of the other things that they have that is really interesting is the technology. They're on the, I mean, they really drive this, is they have drones, and they're big. I mean, like, I'm talking like 4 or 5 feet by 5 feet drones, and they're connected to the ground. So they have like a thin cable, fiber optics that come down. And in the event of needing service at a specific rural location or even communities that don't have cell phone capabilities at this point, they can actually deploy those drones up in the air 300 feet. So, I mean, that's a football field standing up on, and that drone can hover and provide cell phone reception for the surrounding area. And then they also have cameras on that. So then they can scout out and look at different locations like, okay, this might be a good place to deploy. And they can even use different drone technology to inspect their towers before they even get there, so they're prepared to actually restore those.
Yeah, and I think people are probably wondering, why are we talking about this and what Verizon Frontline offers? And the real reason is because communication is the most vital piece of dealing with any type of critical incident, major disaster, all of it. And that's why they've invested so much into Verizon Frontline, to be able to provide that to law enforcement, fire, any type of emergency services where communication has been lost, or like you said, it's the bandwidth is full because too many people are flooding the server, and having the ability to dedicate just to first responders and bring out these tools. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. We know that this started after 9/11 when the towers were hit, all forms of communication were lost. EMS could not communicate with each other. Firefighters couldn't communicate with each other on the radio. Yeah. And so having the ability to do that may not sound like a big deal, but when you're someone that's involved in something like Hurricane Helene or a natural disaster, a wildfire, or a major critical incident, having that ability is it is crucial and it's vital. And so we thank Verizon for everything that they've done to help our job and be successful. At the end of the day, that helps save lives.
It does. And they don't just prepare, they basically provide additional resources as well. So in the event of Hurricane Helene, they have a whole mobile response team with hundreds of employees and staff members around the country that deploy out here to provide those temporary towers in certain locations. So they're spread out. They're doing a lot of this work. But what Verizon Frontline also does is preparation for other major events. So just one thing, it's a national event that you've probably heard. Actually, it's a worldwide event. It's Baker to Vegas. It's a national run. Law enforcement teams put together runners, and they run from Baker to Vegas over, I think it's like a 24-hour time period, and they continually run. Well, the only way this event is even able to operate and to communicate is Verizon Frontline sends a team out, and they actually deploy cell phones to all of the teams, and they create their own internal network. So there's zero communication loss, because one of the things that Verizon prides himself on is having zero disruption in their communication. And they are able to actually make that event possible with their technology.
So what you're saying is you're going to go run Baker to Vegas this year in the desert, the whole thing.
Not even possible, dude. No way. I would, you know what? I think we should participate in that. And if there's a team out there that wants to have us a part of them, I'm not gonna be able to participate and run, because I think I wouldn't provide like a competitiveness at this point, but I'd like to be along for the ride to help cheer people on. I think we'd be pretty good at that.
I'll agree to do it. I'll be in a vehicle that hands out water and supplies to the runners as they're running. So I'll be the support guy in a vehicle driving behind everybody. So I'll do that.
Okay, I'll provide some comedy, maybe some motivation through speaking and jokes and stuff.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like you're down.
Yeah.
All right, well, to everybody that's out there volunteering or helping out in these hurricane reliefs, I know that Florida's been hit hard with Milton, 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene hit. And so these are catastrophe situations, and our hearts go out to everybody that's been affected by them, all the first responders, volunteers, everybody that's stepped up to help. Eric and his team that are out there in North Carolina helping out. I mean, and words can't say enough about, the things that they're doing out there and stepping up to the plate. So we thank everybody, and we want to thank Verizon Frontline for leading the way for communication and being a sponsor of today's video. We greatly appreciate you guys and all the things that you guys are doing, technology.
I think some of the biggest takeaways from the research that we've done today and for this podcast and talking with Eric, I think is being prepared and overly prepared, because he mentioned a couple of things: the medical supplies, not having the capabilities to get out, fuel, resources, chainsaws if you're in one of those areas. So I think really analyzing what you have, where you live, and what boundaries that you have or challenges that you might face in the event of a natural disaster.
Yeah, I think if you think to yourself, if you stripped away all the things that you need and you got rid of that, and then you would have to ask yourself, well, what am I left with? And then how am I going to survive? And then how am I going to get help if I needed to get help?
Yep. And so I think on behalf of the Shots Fired podcast, we really genuinely thank all first responders that are out there working very hard, diligently, pulling long hours, because we know some of you have lost your family members or your property or your homes. Thank you for all the work that you're doing for everyone. There are many people out there that are very, very thankful for all of your efforts. And to the volunteers that are out there, huge effort. I mean, listening with Eric, the fact that he's creating his own teams and airfields going out there is amazing. So it really does take a village. And I think it was really accurate when he said this is a biblical event of how big this is. So hopefully we've brought some information to you regarding this and overall how communication plays a major toll. And at least Verizon Frontline is there. They've deployed out there. They have resources. They're constantly creating technology to help prevent incidents like this from happening with communication aspect.
Yeah. Thank you guys. And we're going to catch you guys on the next episode. We'll see you later.
Stay safe and be smart.